Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar. I'm Daita Sergi, Education Programs Manager with ASHI, and I'll be the moderator today. It is my pleasure to welcome you all. As many of you know, ASHI's mission is to inspire and catalyze higher education to lead a global sustainability transformation. We are an international association with about 1,000 members spread across more than 20 countries, including Colombia and Portugal. Serve as a professional home for campus sustainability staff, but we offer resources for everyone in higher education. We provide an expansive collection of online resources, networking tools, and educational events such as today's webinar, as well as an annual conference and expo which will take place this year in Spokane, Washington from October 27 to the 30th. Online registration will close on October 1st, so please make sure you register before then, and we hope to see you all at the conference. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. Everyone in the audience is on mute, but please feel free to ask questions or provide comments at any point during the presentation. You can do that by typing your questions or comments in the questions pane in the control panel on your screen. If you have additional questions, please email them to education@ashi.org and we will get back to you. At the end of the webinar, you will have the opportunity to provide feedback regarding today's presentation. We take your suggestions into account when planning for future webinars, so please do provide this feedback. Please note this webinar is being recorded. If you experience technical difficulties or have to leave early, you and others can view the recording later. The recording and presentation materials will all be available in the Campus Sustainability Hub after the live broadcast. At this time, I'd like to introduce today's presenters. Carol Binzer is the Director of Administrative and Support Services for the Department of Residence Life at Texas A&M University. With over 1,200 students living on campus, not 1,200, 12,000 students living on campus, Carol works with sustainability initiatives across residence life as part of her responsibilities. Kelly Wellman has served as the Sustainability Director at Texas A&M since March 2008. She's responsible for developing and administering the Campus Sustainability Master Plan, overseeing a grant-giving organization called the EDGI Green Fund, and monitoring institutional sustainability performance through the ASHI STARS rating system. Alison Wilson is an architect and the Sustainability Director of Ayers & Cross. In this role, she supports high-performance building and planning objectives, providing analytical support to the design process, integrating sustainability into campus master plans, and helping projects achieve third-party sustainability certification. More information about the presenters is found on the ASHI website under this webinar listing. It is my pleasure to welcome all attendees and thank you for joining us today. At this time, I'm going to turn to Kelly to get us started.
All right. Thank you, Daita, for that welcome. And actually, thank you to everyone out there. On behalf of Carol and Allison, we really appreciate you taking the time to spend your afternoon talking about sustainability master planning from all perspectives. And I know that, at least from my own experience, planning isn't always the most exciting of topics, yet it tends to be the thing that actually shifts culture the most when comprehensive planning is done effectively. So a little bit about our framework for today. I'm going to give an introduction to the A&M planning, the overall sustainability master planning efforts itself. Then I'll transition to Dr. Binzer, and she'll talk about the residence level plan. And then Allison is really going to wrap us up with kind of the lessons learned from her experience in working with both Carol's department and mine through the planning process. So the major plans we're talking about today provide a macro and micro lenses into our campus. And they were both released in 2018. And coincidentally, Ayers St. Gross is the firm that did work on both of these plans. The Sustainability Master Plan was actually an update to the 2010 plan, and the Residence Life Plan was a completely new venture, which again gives you that micro lens perspective of how a department can embrace sustainability. And because I'm going to cover a lot of different planning documents that went into the creation of this. Just moving forward from a language standpoint, if I say plan or sustainability plan, I'm specifically talking about the campus level, and the residence life plan is specific to that department. The other thing I just wanted to comment on is that because we ended up using the same firm, in this case, Ayers St. Gross, both Carol and I noticed a lot of really positive synergies in the outcome and the product of the plans, and are really grateful for how things look like they're working out and how they're going to help advance the campus themselves. We noticed that the campus collaboration and the institutional knowledge and relationship building that took place in the efforts of these plans really was instrumental in the final product. So a little bit about context for the current, sustainability legacy at Texas A&M University. I'll share just some basics. First off, we did make a decision several years ago to create a definition of sustainability. Not every campus does this. You'll notice that it looks very much like the typical Brundtland Commission, meeting the needs of the present type format. But I want to call out specifically that we were very intentional in talking about environmental, social, as well as economic resources. Our campus has taken the perspective that social sustainability has to be at the forefront of sustainability conversations, and we know that there tends to be a temptation for campus constituencies to really only want to focus on environmental components of sustainability. And to make sure that we resisted that temptation, we really called it out here. And when I say social sustainability, if you're kind of newer to this conversation, we're talking about things that benefit people. You can think of it in terms of equity, opportunity, access for all people. So the springboard for our most recent plan really took place in 2010, and that's when we were really at that point a pioneering effort of itself. It was a very small group of individuals that worked with the firm to create a short-term 5-year plan. It was a firm of Aggies, and those are former students, and the number 12 is magical in Aggie land, so it was no surprise that the firm came up with 12 sustainability goals for the campus to follow through. And like I said, it was short term, so we knew that a couple years ago we were beyond the timeline and really needed to update it. And so this really informed a lot of the work that was going to take place, but other really important building blocks in the plan we'll look at more closely momentarily really come from a variety of places on campus. We had biennial reports that we would perform from our Office of Sustainability. They were really updates to how we were doing on the 2010 plan efforts. At Texas A&M, we generate our own power, water. We do wastewater collection, wastewater treatment. We are responsible for our sanitation and recycling. So the Utilities Energy Service Master Plan, definitely a natural fit and important element to bring into the campus-wide plan. We're doing efforts around bicycle, district strategic planning, so those alternative transportation measures, another important element to pull into the planning. And then you can look at your screen and see these state of diversity reports, and this is getting, again, at that intentional effort to keep social sustainability involved in the conversation of holistic efforts that the campus is driving toward. And of course, one of the biggest building blocks was a 2017 campus master plan. Now this plan was really about the built environment, and coincidentally, Ayers St. Gross was also the firm that did the campus master plan. So from a built environment perspective, in the early 90s, we had a plan, and the only linkage we could find to sustainability was a 2-sentence reference to LEED Silver Standard. And so this effort here that was launched in 17 represented significant enhancements for us, as sustainability and wellness was called out as one of the 6 main focus areas. Not only that, sustainability and wellness had its own chapter, and it was embedded across every other focus area. So if you were looking through this 400-plus page document, you could see anytime sustainability is mentioned, there's a call out to it. And part of that is an effort to educate the campus and to have a bigger, broader understanding of what sustainability looks like and means. In that plan, the different themes of sustainability were fleshed out a little bit different from the original 2010 plan. I'll call your attention to the lower center there. You see dining services with a couple arrows, And what we ended up doing was considering dining in the waste management theme as well as the social sustainability theme. So as we're looking at the sustainability plan in a moment, you won't specifically see dining, but it is embedded in those themes. And speaking of that, let's go ahead and move into the actual topic at hand, which is the 2018 Sustainability Master Plan for the campus. So one of the goals that we really wanted to address in this update was to move from academic and operational silos into a more integrated, holistic planning approach. And after all, sustainability is holistic. So how do we talk about and deploy sustainability with planet, people, and payback all being integrated together? That was one of the lenses that we were really moving toward in a quilted fashion. The next goal was to advance Texas A&M Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System performance. So STARS, our campus has been an active member of STARS since late 2010. And it's really been the way our campus community stakeholders understand sustainability because we've been doing it for so long. And so that was the common language. And we knew that if we could elevate our performance in STARS, it would also improve our performance in the plan and vice versa. So we really wanted to integrate those. And what you're looking at on this screen here is basically the academic aspirant peers for Texas A&M. Now I know Aishi likes to say STARS is a rating system, not a ranking system, but let's be realistic. We know we all have competitive leanings, and so just like any other sport, when you see scores and how you're doing it, it drives and improves change. Now, this particular slide is showing June of 18. Current day slide looks a little bit different than this. But this, again, was a great leverage point for advancing our campus. The third lens that we were using was we wanted to engage the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals and at least get that conversation out there in a more obvious way. And so we hosted multiple open forums with students, faculty, and staff, having them map the 17 goals to the different sustainability themes. And on the right, you can see that the 5 most important sustainability-related themes for Texas A&M, they felt were around conservation of energy and water, reducing waste, renewable energy, as well as recycling. And then the things that were important from a more global perspective were about access to clean water and air, quality education, health, and food supply. So again, this was just another lens that we wanted to use in the planning process. So a little bit more about the plan and its overview. There are 4 major focus areas. Each of those focus areas had a working group of roughly 22 subject matter experts that were going to help inform and create the ultimate targets in the wording and crafting of the document. We used the 9 themes, which I showed you and you'll see again in a moment, and ultimately created 16 evergreen goals, 47 targets, and 162 actions, of which would all take place over a 20-year planning horizon. And you can see here that we also developed short, medium, and long-term targets to go with that. Here are those sustainability themes again that were adapted from that built environment plan. The 4 colors simply denote the 4 different areas, the 4 thematic working group areas for the plan. A little bit about the layout. At the top of every new section is where you see the evergreen goals. Sometimes there's 1 evergreen goal per section, and sometimes there's multiple. We had baseline data and created short, medium, or long-term targets to go with the measurable metrics that we wanted to achieve, and we specified what actions we thought would help us achieve those targets. My favorite improvement in this plan over the 2010 plan is at the end we have a plan at a glance, which is a summary of all of the targets and actions. But the added benefit is that we included key players. So we basically said who are leading and supporting the different actions for each of the targets. And this, I think, is what's going to help actually bring this plan to life, because we've got stakeholders on board and they know that they're bought into this process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carol and let her lead you into that more micro level lens.
Howdy. Carol here from Residence Life. Part of my role, yes.
So we see what you see. We see your notes as well. You can go forward like this, or you can switch the display settings. Not there. Go up where it says
Okay.
display settings. More
I thought I had
higher. Yeah, where it says display settings on the very top. Yeah, right there.
Got it.
Swap. There you go.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I'm new at this. Part of my role in residence life is to be the champion for sustainability for on-campus housing. As a result, I get to be a part of a number of different campus-wide groups that are pursuing sustainability. And so I got to be part of the stakeholder groups for both the campus master plan as well as the sustainability update plan, and so did several of my colleagues. It was their involvement that caused us to talk about what about having a closer look at things that residence life could do. Using the same firm, AirSync Gross, made infinite sense because of their background knowledge and the legwork that they had already done. Consultants had that advantage, Allie, had the advantage of lots of preloaded knowledge and pre-existing relationships. Additionally, we had all worked with them. We followed, it took some time, using the same institutional framework brought structure where we weren't able to find examples. When we looked to see what other departments of housing had plans, we didn't find anything. Those who had a plan, it was the university level plan that they were just picking and choosing from about things that they would follow up on. They extrapolated and adopted. So it was acknowledged early on that of the 9 themes that were part of the campus plan, a few were not within residence life's control. So some were just the customers and were not able to influence infrastructure or others very much. Others we have more dominion over. It took some time to discuss what the deliverables ought to be. 4 came to light pretty easily and pretty early on in the process. The plan itself was important as a byproduct because we couldn't find one to use, as I mentioned, as a foundation, a jumping off point. That being the independent plan for an on-campus housing just at the department level. Ours, by the way, is on our website, and the analytics indicate that some folks have found it, and we're glad about that. We hope it's a helpful prototype. The posters up in the top right are aimed at current students living on and supports RA's requirements to provide educational bulletin boards, which they're very excited about. They couldn't believe we thought of just them. They're popular topics and staff and students are responding well to them. In fact, we've now had to put out a form so that they can order more for specific places and particular ones that they really like. The brochure is being used in recruiting prospective residents and their families. It's an amenity that on-campus housing offers. One of our off-campus competitors are not offering things like recycling, water bottle filling station, the opportunity to compost, or any of those things. So we're just a little bit ahead in that game. And I think it's coming everywhere because our students are coming to us each year, each fall, with more background and experience with sustainability from high school or from their home communities. And the bottom, the utility dashboard, it's not the best picture of it, but it allows us to graph the data per building and allows us to compare historic data as well as types of buildings against one another, ones that have been renovated and updated versus ones that haven't, and that's been especially useful. I otherwise have a 300-page utility bill that doesn't look like yours at home, where you can see what you used last month and what you used a year ago as a way of eyeballing whether or not you're in the right ballpark. And we're talking about a portfolio of 50 plus buildings. In fact, it's almost 60 now. So here's what we looked at from a utilities point of view and an overall energy use index. So we've been monitoring closely since 2010, and as a result, our bill has gone from an overall $10 million a year to just over $6 million per year, while increasing the real estate or the conditioned space. Certainly renovation and deferred maintenance have been a part of this, but catching early trends or anomalies as we watch from month to month has really allowed us to jump on maintenance issues and allowed us to put things back into kilter. So we have some historic data, so it's easy to see if the anomalies are occurring. From the slide, you can see there's variability on the far left. We have some of our apartments where our students pay their own utilities, and some of the other lower ones are where our Corps of Cadets live, and they're not allowed a lot of privileges or a lot of appliances, so their general consumption is a little bit lower anyway. So we're working on all of it, but this was a way of helping to graph it and see. Here are some of the posters, 2 of the 7, about infrastructure and engagement. They get at one of the objectives of our project, which is certainly to affirm that we've been on the right track and where we had been spending our time and our resources, and taking some constructive action. They also helped us not only tell the story, but celebrate some of our gains. The set of posters is 7. They've been now distributed to every hall, as I mentioned, and we're already getting questions from students about wanting to do more, which, of course, as an administrator, a mixed blessing. Since 2010, staff championing initiatives, applying for Aggie Green Fund grants, and continuing student engagement efforts, we've tried all kinds, has been a little bit of a buckshot approach. This poster series helps bring some focus and shape some priorities along with the plan. Here are 2 more of the posters, and also a key to student engagement is increasing their knowledge. So they focus on social sustainability, a significant part for both the campus and residence life's commitment and focus. The recycling one addresses the challenge we most wish to overcome, which is what can I recycle and where? We hope through universal labeling of our containers and these educational efforts to take away the excuse from students of, I didn't know what I could recycle or where it would go. Here is the building EUI, and we were so excited because we are already doing better as a collective portfolio than the university aspires to get to. So we felt strongly about contributing to the university's mission to reduce energy use intensity. We'll continue on those buildings that we talked about. In fact, we should be finished by 2022 with all of the HVAC systems from the buildings that were built in the 40s to the 70s. So here's what our plan looked like, very similar to the university's plan and very easy to follow. It gives a collective way forward, spreads out the responsibility for championing sustainability and all that that means to residence life. So for us, it was really a way to invite people in. It underscores the importance of some smaller actions and some individual related practices, as opposed to just millions of dollars in HVAC renovation, which is important, but this plan lets more people be more involved. It also captured the interests of students. As I mentioned, they are more and more savvy as they get to us, and as a Tier 1 research institution, their expectations of us are really high, and certainly to be current and involved. And it supports the mission for us to contribute to the education of students as global citizens. So we really work hard at that, and this is one of those areas that's kind of a hot topic and one they're really interested in, and we'll take all opportunities to get in. As you can see, the action items, this one is about increasing wellness and rec center access. And so what happened to us was this harkened back to our campus master plan, which talks about a satellite rec center, which is already in the planning, and we anticipate within 3 years it being on the south side. We've added outdoor rec spaces near halls and apartments, a gaga pit, volleyball, basketball, and we've even tried yoga and dance classes offered by the rec in our hall common spaces. So it's not so much that the plan presented new ideas as much as emphasizing the consonance with our values and underscoring them. And in times of shrinking resources and serious off-campus competition, the opportunity to have sort of documentation that this is the way forward and should have some priority has really been appreciated. Our plan at a glance is actually a progress checklist. We know that we're primarily responsible, so we didn't need to identify huge numbers of champions, though we have our campus partners represented and they're engaged with us. But we were looking at trying to mark progress. So how much closer are we to our goals? There was certainly some low-hanging fruit and things that we could take care of. And there are some things that, because we're a smaller department in a bigger university, we could maybe get our arms around and get the infrastructure going for. And I think Allie said it best. She said we're a little bit more nimble or agile in what we can try to get accomplished, and then maybe the rest of the university could, in smaller bits, follow suit. So we like that opportunity. One of the things that we thought about most when we were trying to put this webinar together and even proposing it was there's been such synergy and such connection that we really wanted to tell you about the benefits to doing these processes simultaneously or back to back, if at all possible. One of the beauties, and there are two examples we're going to tell you about, but this first one is it was that the resident life folks started considering water use intensity. And that's because I have almost 12,000 students living on campus 24/7. And so they're bathing with us, they're doing their laundry. It's not just an 8 to 5 operation. So while we were working on water use, it dawned on us who are connected to the campus plan that the campus really hadn't thought too much about water. Now, water is one of our cheapest commodities, so people generally don't want to spend too much of their time sort of doing the cost-benefit analysis, worrying about it. And yet Texas is facing some concerns about shortages and the ease of getting access to water long into the future. So we were happy to be looking at water and now become the champion. This goal in ours has been elevated to the campus plan. I will tell you that being named in the campus plan comes with some apprehension, but we're in the right direction. We're trying very hard to balance hydration stations and the promotion of drinking more water to be a healthier person and use less plastic bottles and drink less soda with take shorter showers, dual flush toilet, sinks, don't let the sinks run, and then laundry, which doesn't require coin operation. It's included in their rent, so we want them to be smarter. And now the increasing number of kitchens students have to work with as they want to cook for themselves. So nonetheless, a laudable goal and a reasonable target. And with that, I'll let Kelly share the next example of how the two plans work together.
Great, thank you, Carol. What you're seeing here actually is the opportunity of integration across the three plans, the built environment, as well as the sustainability plan and residence life. And a key component of social sustainability is voice. And we recognize that providing spaces on campus that represent broader cross-sections of the community are really what helps elevate that voice. And so that's what you're looking at here. Let me give you a little bit more context. Texas A&M was originally founded as an all-male military institution. And so we have a really rich history around that. And of course, the campus has been afforded that history of predominantly white men, and so therefore the campus architecture / art that you see in public spaces is of our rich history. So there are a lot of bronze statues of a lot of successful male leaders, and that's great. It just doesn't necessarily represent how much the institution's changed since the integration of the campus, as well as adding women to the campus. And so public art is one of those ways to elevate voice and show that broader cross-section. You'll notice in the center that in the sustainability plan, we specifically, give some numbers and say that we want in public spaces, whether they're inside or outside, to have at least 3 more diverse pieces of art. And that's short term, which is, anything before 2023, and then medium term would be anything before 2028. And so the interesting thing is that as this conversation has continued to develop and grow, you see that Residence Life was very successful in adding it there. And once the students understood what was trying to be accomplished, they were big proponents of it, and that gave it more momentum. I happened to be talking with the university architect the other day and following up on this specific metric, and we're going to accomplish that medium-term goal of more diverse spaces really in the short term. We'll do that by 2023. So this is kind of one of those ways that once you put it in writing and you have the conversations, this gets things in motion. And what I didn't say is it's not just the art that you're looking at, but it's also who is creating the art. So there are a lot of different ways to bring in different perspectives and aspects. And what does this look like when I'm talking about art? I'll just show you an image. And this is a sculpture that is less than 5 years old on campus. If you can hit the next slide, Carol. Is that you or me? Sorry, y'all got it.
It should be on Carol's side, but I can switch over to you, Kelly.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to switch over to us, we can grab it.
Turn on your webcams too.
Okay, got it. Yep. Okay, so what you're looking at here is a more recent piece of art. It is this is in front of Kyle Field, which is our football stadium, home of the 12th man. There's that magic 12 number again. And it's, at the time they were students who were on campus who were used as the models for this piece of artwork. And it's interesting because I'm on campus at really peculiar times of day, any day of the week. And there's no other statue of, people that I see as photographed as this one, because there's constantly someone pulled over, stopped, and out taking pictures in front of it. And I think it's just a really good way to show how this makes people feel connected to space and that they belong. So with that, that's kind of our second example of how to integrate efforts. And I'm going to turn it over now to Allie so she can talk about lessons learned from her perspective, having worked on multiple plans with us.
Awesome. Thank you. I would say this is only a small subset. This is only a small subset of the lessons learned. Carol, Kelly, and I had several hours of discussion about these, and they rose to the top. But certainly, we've left a lot of time for questions at the end of this webinar. So please start thinking about those and chatting them over so Daita can administer that part. But at any rate, the first piece of this that I wanted to elevate, plan to plan. We had the blessing of having been on campus for probably 2 years by the time we started the sustainability master plan with the campus master plan work. And so we were sort of aware of all of the different entities that would need to participate or that would have information to bring to the table. And so at the beginning of our process with Kelly, we as the outside consultant basically gave them this list of these are all the different people we can think of who are likely going to have something to say about sustainability on your campus. And we had developed those 9 themes in the campus master plan and had started to sort through how to organize the conversation into a discussion about physical environment, a separate one on waste, a separate one on social sustainability, and then a last conversation on institutional efforts. And what we did was provide this map of saying, here are the different organizations within A&M, and we think they're going to have something to say about all of these different topics. And then Kelly and her group identified the actual people that were represented by those X's. So we put some arms around it as far as how large we wanted these stakeholder groups to be. But then Kelly and her team really identified the who that would be part of these conversations. We met with these groups individually as part of the process, and then we also had a number of sessions that were joint working groups where we took, all of these different folks and mixed them up in one room. I would also say lesson learned topics are going to take a different amount of time to mature. I was going back through our project planning and both the number of meetings that were held on these different topics as well as the duration of those meetings. And they were different. Social sustainability took a lot longer to evolve. There were a lot of discussions with leadership about why is social sustainability important? How is this part of sustainability? Is this in conflict with what the Office of Diversity is doing? Aren't you stepping on your toes? Get back in your lane a little bit. And Kelly and her team, did a great job with the Office of Diversity at A&M to sort of navigate what that looked like and figure out where we had opportunities to reiterate goals and elevate work that others were doing on campus, as well as sort of redirect, gently nudge a few pieces in different directions, and really just bring a whole lot more people under the tent of things that were included in, equity, diversity, inclusion conversations, social sustainability more broadly. On the flip side, waste management was almost done from the beginning. It was a much more finite discussion, so we didn't need to invest quite so much of our effort there. Speaking back to that social sustainability piece specifically, vocabulary is really important, and I think this is where having an outside consultant, I think, helped A&M a lot. Because we're not A&M, even though we like to feel adopted, people could say things to us that they couldn't say to Kelly and they couldn't say to Carol because there would be politics involved or social circumstances or whatever. I think in some ways as the outside consultant, we were a little bit of group therapy of just, we could just listen and absorb and there were no consequences for what people said to us. And so when we were talking about the vocabulary that went with social sustainability, we did these kinds of activities where we could just throw all kinds of words at the ideas that people were talking about and understand what resonated with people. So in this particular activity, we had multiple wordings of a set of evergreen goals for health and wellness and a number of targets that could go with that. And we were asking people to connect the dots. We were trying to figure out what language resonated with people. And as you can see, some of them we totally didn't, the language wasn't as important. All of these evergreen goals linked up with basically every one of the targets, and folks didn't have quite as much investment in the different wordings versus the EDI section. You can see, two of these evergreen goals, those words resonated much more strongly with the community than the others that we had proposed. So it really helped us hone in on what language was going to help evolve these goals. Student voices carry weight. This is a little bit of a no-brainer, but when in doubt, ask your students. It was fantastically compelling to do a lot of student engagement and a lot of student outreach and be able to bring this kind of a graph to a meeting with leadership to say, hey, your students care about this, or we would do the same kinds of activities with students as we did with administrators and start to do a little bit of comparing and contrasting to understand were administrators and students on the same page as far as what was valuable about sustainability, or were they on different ends of the spectrum? So it really helped to do a lot of student engagement. Some of them were also, just ease of things. Was infrastructure in place to make activities the administration wanted to see easy? This is actually from the Res Life work, and you can see, right, this when we were telling the story about this data. This 39% and 16%, these people are already converted to recycling. This 20% and this 24% are people who needed the education, who needed to understand, do we actually even have recycling? How do I do it? And then that started to play into the deliverables that we provided as part of the process. Open-ended questions are always a little scary because you never know what you're going to get. And admittedly, this is a total cherry picking of the really good ones. But, you know, we got a fair number of just the random things that people will write in, or smiley faces and that kind of thing. But we also got some really poignant comments and things that made a difference. And I think one of the most compelling things for me as the builder for a lot of the background pieces was we were at a launch event for the Res Life plan, and one of the students who had participated in our working groups was sitting in the audience, and something that she had said in one of our discussions made it into the plan in one way or another. It had been, you know, morphed and evolved through input with others, but it was there. And she came up afterwards and she was like, "You listened. I'm in the plan. Like my ideas, my words are in the plan." And that was so valuable to us, and I think for Res Life and for the overarching plan for the institution as well, because we made use of their feedback, and the fact that they could continue to see themselves in the plan meant that they were invested. And that meant that, you know, as Carol continues to do implementation, as Kelly continues to do implementation, there's a battery of support behind the information that's in there, regardless of the fact that students and faculty and leadership are going to transition with time. This is a lesson learned about being a little bit bold. Sometimes folks get busy and aren't going to give you the information you need in the time frame that it is going to be most useful. And so sometimes we took the risk, and we could do that because, again, we're an outside consultant, to just put it in print. And the entire objective sometimes of putting some of this stuff in print was to be told that we were wrong, because until we put it in print and until some various organizations would start to see, oh, you're actually going to write that in the plan? Like, this is going to get published? Oh, well, hang on, let me tell you what we're actually doing, or how we think we're really going to accomplish some of that. And then all of a sudden that evolves, and you get the information that you've been hunting for, you know, 6 months anyway. But sometimes we had to make those kinds of leaps. And you know, put ourselves out there and take the associated risks that went with it. This is on the academic front. Sustainability in academics can sometimes be challenging, and the emphasis of it. Again, at A&M, because ours is such a large framework for understanding what success looks like, we accepted the fact that some of these targets were going to be maintenance targets in a couple of these different criteria that STARS particularly measures. A&M had maxed out the number of points that they could achieve under STARS. So instead of trying to beat a dead horse a little bit of, you know, we're already achieving the most that we can from an external framework, let's not worry about those. Let's celebrate the fact that we're doing really well and continue to do really well. And then we can encourage advancement by, you know, adding in a target here and there that starts to talk about, okay, we're not working on this at all right now, or we don't have any documentation to document this at all right now. Let's put our emphasis there, because it's where we can have the biggest impact. So I wouldn't shy away from having some information in documentation that really is about celebrating what's already been done, and you know, the people who have already been part of the choir for sustainability at your institution. This is also a no-brainer. Many hands make light work. I think probably most institutions that are on this call right now are very small offices. A&M's Office of Sustainability has 3 full-time staff members and a number of student interns every semester, but realistically it's the 3 folks who kind of keep shepherding these efforts along every year. But we had 54 working group participants, and these people were from all over campus, and whether sustainability was specifically in their title or not, you know, when Kelly was talking about key players at the end of the document, it's those 54 people and then some that are going to make change happen at A&M. So making sure that, you know, the Office of Sustainability's role at A&M wasn't necessarily to implement every single one of these targets and actions, but really to be the coordinator, the documenter of those, you know, 54 working group participants and their departments play into the various roles that they had in the plan. If I look at that pie graph again about where our time was spent as part of the process, you know, I said social sustainability was kind of on the longest maturity timeline to get to where we needed to for a final deliverable. We spent as long working on social sustainability as we did keeping leadership engaged. We went to so many different President's Executive Committee on this, or, you know, Dean's Council on that, and making sure that as we were doing this, you know, we had done all the grassroots pieces first. So we had lots of data, we had lots of engagement information from students already, from, you know, the different working group activities already, we were presenting them nearly finished work, but making sure that those leadership groups knew, hey, all those constituents that you represent or that you engage are all behind this. We have the momentum to do this. And keeping that sort of engagement going throughout the process, I think, means that, as that leadership transitions, because it's also being led from the middle, those efforts will continue. Like I said, there are a number of other topics and lessons that we learned along the way, but I'm happy to open it up for questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Carol, Kelly, and Ali, for amazing presentation and a lot of information that you hit our attendees with. And yes, there are questions here. So let me go to the first question. And I'm not sure who wants to take this one, but what was the timeline from start to finish for this planning effort? And Kelly, you can turn on the camera back. There you go.
Okay, so for the campus level plan, it was actually to the day. It didn't really have to take 18 months, but because of when we launched with our President's Sustainability Advisory Council, it was at the end of April. And we didn't want to do a whole lot of work once the faculty and staff were gone for the summer. Well, there were still people there, but largely gone. And so we went ahead and took those few months to really bring folks on campus up to speed and do our homework. And that really delayed the timeline a little bit. And of course, once we got to the end in March, when we expected to be finished, that's when you start going around and spending a little bit more with leadership and explaining why some of the targets are what they are and doing corrective work. So there were things we could have done a little differently in our launch timeline, but 18 months, just to answer that up a little more succinctly, for the master plan on sustainability.
18 months and 6 months of it, we as consultants were kind of sitting quietly in the background.
And I think Residence Life went from October to June or July. Does that sound right, Allie?
That sounds about right, yeah. And similarly, trying to time our work with the academic calendar so that we could make the most of engagement and whatnot. Yeah.
And students really appreciated that. So, yeah, the June, July stuff was reviewing and reading, and so finishing up, wrapping up.
Thank you. So how did you get the Texas A&M leadership to buy into needing to do a sustainability study, put money and time behind the effort?
It's a great question. Being a larger institution that does have some funding for environmental enhancements is obviously a benefit. We had that 2010 plan. The chair of our President's Sustainability Advisory Council is our vice president and chief financial officer. So, and I work in that reporting chain. So the knowledge that we needed to update that 2010 plan was there. That worked in our favor. At the end of the day, speaking very frankly, I would have liked the university to have funded it. We ended up using our green fund pool of dollars to finance the plan, and it was certainly worth it. But that was a vehicle that we were able to use to get the leadership on board.
Well, and our president has said he would like our campus to be a laboratory for all the best of sustainability. That certainly has inspired the Sustainability Advisory Council that Kelly sort of shepherds.
Thank you. So do the plans have some aspirational targets as well that don't have clear methods of achievement?
Yes. we learned this one a little bit the hard way too. We had a lot of conversations in social sustainability specifically about what would be measurable for different discussions we were having about social sustainability. And, we got up as a consultant team in front of one of the working groups and we were like, look, this is the actual data that exists on a number of these different topics. Would knowing that information do anything about, would it change any actions that you would take, or would it change the climate of what's going on at this institution in any way, or is it just more information? And so there were a number of targets that, were a little bit more narrative-based, that aren't necessarily measurable things, but that start to be call-out boxes in the document of, hey, if you want to get involved in these different ways, here's the vehicle to do that. And the same thing happened in the Res Life plan, that there were a couple of places where it wasn't measurable, but we had heard enough student voices talk about something as a challenge that we wanted to record what the tenor of the conversations were and make some suggestions about what could happen to address those in future, but that weren't necessarily quite so measurable. So there were definitely some aspirational targets in there.
I have two follow-up comments. One is that at a state institution, anything that involves costs alarms everybody. And the first answer is we could never afford that. And so having it out there as an aspirational topic or goal target allows people to start to think outside the box or think about maybe a little pie in the sky, but about other partners. One of the things we're trying to work on is people parking their car once in the morning and not driving to and fro across the campus to various meetings and use other means. My department, for example, has started using these cameras to try and do Zoom meetings so that my staff, which is spread out all over campus, doesn't have to keep getting themselves to a building far from them. The second is, although not measurable, again, research institution, that's kind of not the best excuse. It just means it needs more of these bright minds trying to figure it out. So not putting it there because it's either too expensive or we can't puzzle it out right at the moment, were viewed as not viable reasons not to be included.
Thank you. So Carol mentioned pending regional water shortages. As our understanding of a looming climate crisis increases along with our understanding of regional impacts, are you planning to shorten the plan's timeline horizon?
Well, first I have to convince people that worrying about water would be a good thing. The plan helps me a little bit, and so there's the education process, but I've also invited them to consider the rec center's use of water, where everybody goes, and several off-campus properties that are built actually on university land. So building the partnerships, trying to change the conversation so we are monitoring it or looking at it. We do a lot of, and you all will understand this better than I do, but dumping water to ease the pressure in pipes and things like that. And there have to be other ways to manage some of that. It's related to HVAC system stuff. So I'm conceptually very strong and vocabulary very weak, so pardon me, but this is how we get some stuff done. You send me in to ask questions, and because it doesn't make sense to the plain citizen, we get to get a better understanding and get to ask the question of how could it work better. So it's about changing the conversation. So the simple answer is yes, the timeline will be shorter. We're not in grave danger, but we need people to take it more seriously sooner as opposed to later.
And the Res Life goal really and truly is a way to get every Aggie involved in the water conservation discussion, where like the big low-hanging fruit at A&M for water conservation is in irrigation, right? There's a golf course at A&M. There's hundreds and thousands of acres of land. And so the campus master plan, going way back to 2017, had a lot of sustainability related language as far as how do you preserve heritage landscape areas that are, the big green turf lawns that require a lot of irrigation, but what kinds of things could be transitioned to things that are going to be less intensive, and how might that accelerate the conversation towards water conservation as well.
And they've made some progress on that, but there's much more to go.
So you mentioned the Aggie, so we just got a shout out from a alumni, a former Aggie, and also UCLA says hi. But let's go back to the question. So how much square footage and how many buildings were involved in the sustainability planning?
Oh, wow. So that is actually, as you might imagine, or for a campus our size, a complicated question. So officially, because we provide utilities, and there's been a more recent trend at A&M where we have A&M owned lands, but private development's happening on those lands. Our utilities is actually managing just over 27 million square feet of space. So that was part of your question. I'm sorry, Daida. What was the rest of it? Can you ask me again?
think it was on square footage and number of buildings.
Number of buildings. Technically, there are over 700 buildings on campus. Of course, that number includes every small shed that you could imagine. A more realistic space of that is about 400 buildings. And so that energy use intensity number, though, that we're looking at is really including all the space that we provide power to. And that's why that 27 million gross square feet of space is so large. And it does complicate things for the institution because there are newer private developments where students are in private housing that is technically on campus, but it's not campus. And we don't necessarily have the same kind of control in the private development for
public-private partnerships.
Yeah, and Carol knows all about that.
Yeah. Yes, I do. Public-private partnerships where we are the manager, but not the owner and not in control of what was value engineered, which is a term many of our builder friends will know. And
the dashboard.
Not always the panacea it's described.
The dashboard that we built for the Res Life group was about 60 buildings, I think, that were Res Life specific.
I think it's something like 3 million gross square feet and 2.3 something usable, not mechanical.
Thank you. So we have 3 more questions. We'll try to go through all of them by the end of the webinar, but if not, we do have a hard stop at the top of the hour. So did you set aside funds in your capital plan to address the sustainability action items?
That's a great question. We did not already have money set aside, although our President's Sustainability Advisory Council, once the plan was complete, we walked them through an exercise to prioritize those 47 targets across those 4 areas. So we basically distilled it down and said, what are the 2 most important targets in each of the 4 areas? We looked at those 8 targets, and then we started creating the cost associated with it. In fact, next week I've got to turn in some information asking for fiscal year 21 budget money, one-time funding to help try to make those targets a reality. So while it wasn't already addressed preemptively, we've done the work to get the numbers and estimates, and now we are moving forward for the next fiscal year's funding of those items.
And Residence Life already has committed monies for the renovations of the buildings or the updating of the HVAC systems and finishes and such. But we weren't sure how it would come out. And so we do a lot of our sustainability through grants and corporate sponsors. So we're big writers of Aggie Green Fund grants. So when we got tasked with, for example, collecting the e-waste and providing more opportunities for students in particular to dump off their e-waste, the Aggie Green Fund helped us get the containers, and then we're providing the labeling and the staffing to be able to remove the stuff, as well as some stickers for laundry rooms and things like that. So yes, monies are being dedicated. They aren't all rent monies, although we're not opposed to that. It would just be a sort of a planning and reallocation. And we've mapped all the recommendations that came both from the sustainability plan and the utilities challenge that we run where our students study the buildings. And so we're mapping a way forward, and that includes budgeting for it.
Thank you. So maybe very quickly on the campus education on recycling, do you educate students, faculty, and staff on what is acceptable materials? There's a lot on recycling material being returned due to contamination.
Carol, I don't know if I can answer, you can answer.
Well, she's looking at me because it's my dead horse to beat. We have several challenges with recycling. One is that our collection points across the campus are centralized. And so when housekeepers it's in their contract to divert the recycling to appropriately, it's more of a pain in the neck to move it there, whereas the compactors are close by. So we find sometimes the easy way is taken, and not everything a student puts in their recycling container makes it. So we're doing better with educating. Different departments, different schools have taken it on. We're doing a TREX plastic film challenge that caught on more than we thought it would. Faculty and staff probably as much interested in it as students. Trex does the composite decking, collect the film, turn it in, 500 pounds, get you a Trex bench. So the interest is there. The other challenge we have is that 70% of the people who live with me every year are brand new to the university. So it's an education and a re-education process. I know there are some new faculty and staff as well. That turnover number is just not as high. So the education infrastructure is not completely in place, but neither is the channel for diverting it appropriately.
Thank you so much, Carol, Kelly, and Ellie. We're at time, and I'd like to thank all of our attendees for joining us today. And we have a webinar every Wednesday for the rest of the year almost. So please check out our calendar of events on the issue website. And if you're interested in the recording, there will be an email going out tomorrow with a link to the archive of this webinar. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.